Hey everyone, ready to go behind the scenes of some of the biggest tech companies out there.
We're ditching the textbooks for this deep dive.
Yeah, no more dry theory here.
Yeah.
You wanted to get a handle on DevOps tools, and we're going straight to the source. Real-world examples of how companies are using these tools.
To build and manage software at a scale,
That'll make your head spin.
it's pretty wild how much we rely on these services every day without even realizing just how complex they really are.
Right.
So today we'll be breaking down 5 key tools: Jenkins, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and then we've got the dynamic duo Prometheus and Grafana.
Perfect. Let's kick things off with Jenkins. You know, it's often called the granddaddy of CI/CD. But before we get into that, can you quickly break down what CI/CD actually means?
Oh, of course, yeah. CI/CD stands for continuous integration and continuous delivery.
Okay.
So imagine, if you will, a factory line, but for code.
Okay.
And developers are constantly pushing out updates, right? CI/CD is all about automating that whole process, the building, the testing, and the delivery of these updates. And what that does is it makes everything faster and more reliable.
So instead of developers scrambling to manually push these updates, it's Jenkins that steps in, kind of like the automated maestro, keeping the code flowing smoothly.
That's a great way to put it.
And you mentioned reliability, which brings us to Netflix. They're handling a crazy number of deployments every single day, all to keep that streaming service running. What role does Jenkins play in that?
I mean, Jenkins is absolutely essential to how Netflix operates. They have, get this, thousands of microservices.
Wow.
Think of those as like individual components of their platform.
Okay.
And they have to make sure that every single time they make a change to one of those microservices, that it doesn't, break the entire system.
Right.
Yeah.
So Jenkins is like the quality control manager, making sure each piece of code is working in harmony with the rest.
Exactly. And to handle this volume of updates, they actually went ahead and built their own custom Jenkins plugin.
No way.
It's called the Jenkins Execution Engine.
Okay.
It's designed to manage these really, really complex dependencies between microservices. And the most important thing it does is make sure that deployments happen in the correct order.
Wow, so they built their own plugin. That's dedication.
Yeah.
So it's not just about using the tool off the shelf, it's about understanding its full potential and adapting it to your specific needs.
Yeah, for sure.
I like that. Speaking of adapting, let's move on to Docker. You know, it's often described as shipping containers for code, but can you unpack that a bit more for us?
Sure.
What problem does Docker solve and how?
I'm sure you've probably experienced this. You're working on some code and it works perfectly on your computer, but then somebody else tries to run it and it just fails.
Ugh, yes.
It's super frustrating. A lot of times that happens because of differences in, operating systems or libraries or other dependencies. Docker solves this by packaging the application and all of its dependencies together into what's called a container. So it's a self-contained unit that can then be run anywhere.
So it's like shipping a fully furnished apartment instead of just sending someone a pile of furniture and hoping they can put it all together themselves.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
I try.
And that consistency that Docker brings, that's absolutely essential, especially for companies like Spotify, who are so reliant on this microservices architecture. I mean, they have literally thousands of these tiny little services all working together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so Docker helps them to manage all of that complexity by making sure that every microservice runs smoothly, no matter where it's deployed.
Gotcha. All right, so we've got our code neatly packaged in these containers thanks to Docker. But what happens when you've got hundreds, thousands of these containers all running? It's like you'd need an air traffic controller to manage all of that, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is where Kubernetes comes in. If we think about Docker as the shipping container, right? Kubernetes is like the port, managing this whole flow of containers, allocating resources, and making sure that everything's running smoothly, even with massive amounts of traffic coming in.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. Can you give us an example of how Kubernetes is being used out there in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. Airbnb, for example, they use Kubernetes to manage their entire platform.
Huge.
Which handles millions of bookings every single day. Now, before they had Kubernetes, deploying new features or updates to their system was a really, really slow and painful process.
I can imagine.
It would take hours, sometimes even days, to roll out these changes.
So if I wanted to book a last-minute trip, I might have been out of luck because the site was stuck updating.
It's very possible, yeah.
Yeah.
But with Kubernetes, they were able to reduce their deployment times from hours down to minutes.
Wow.
Which meant they could roll out new features and fix bugs much faster. And that made them way more agile and responsive to, what their users needed.
That's a game changer. So we've gone from code to containers to now orchestrating all of these containers.
Right.
What's the next step in this whole journey of building and managing software at this kind of scale?
Well, now you have to think about the infrastructure that underpins all of these applications.
Yeah.
The servers, the databases, the networks. I mean, that stuff can be incredibly complex. And, traditionally managing all that infrastructure has been a very, very manual process.
Right.
It's very prone to errors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is it's time to automate the infrastructure itself.
You got it. That is where Terraform comes in. Terraform allows you to define your entire infrastructure as code.
Whoa.
So that means you can do things like version control, automate its deployment, and ensure consistency across all of your different environments.
Just like you would with software.
Exactly.
So it's like taking the blueprint for your entire digital city and turning it into a program that can just build it with a push of a button.
I love that analogy, yeah. And, companies like Uber, with their massive global infrastructure that spans multiple cloud providers, they rely on Terraform to manage all of that complexity and make sure that everything is, reliable, that it can scale, and that it's secure.
It's a great example. I mean, Uber, they can't afford any downtime. Manually managing all those servers would be, well, a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Terraform helps them keep the lights on, so to speak.
Yep.
But once everything is running smoothly, how do these companies keep tabs on it all?
Yeah.
It's not like you can just set it and forget it.
You're absolutely right. Things can go wrong, even with the most robust systems.
Yeah.
So that's why monitoring is just so crucial. And that's where Prometheus and Grafana come in. Prometheus is I like to think of it as a data detective.
Okay.
Constantly collecting metrics from all of your systems. While Grafana is like the master visualizer, taking all of that data and turning it into dashboards, that are really easy to understand and act on.
So imagine you're in this control room with this giant wall of screens, and each one is showing you the vital signs of a different part of your system.
Yeah.
Prometheus and Grafana are the team that built that control room and are keeping it running.
Yeah, perfect analogy. And companies like DigitalOcean, which provides cloud infrastructure to, thousands of businesses.
Yeah.
They rely on Prometheus and Grafana to monitor their massive network of servers, identify any potential issues, and make sure that their entire platform is performing at its best.
Wow, we've covered so much. From code to containers to infrastructure to monitoring.
Oh, yeah.
It's clear these tools are essential for building and managing software at scale, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
How do these tools translate to smaller teams or smaller projects? Do you need to be a tech giant to actually benefit from them?
That's a really great question, and one that we are going to explore in a lot more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, hold that thought.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Sounds good. So before the break, we were talking about how these DevOps tools,
These powerful tools.
how they can benefit,
Teams of all sizes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. We've seen how they operate on a massive scale.
Right.
But can smaller teams really get in on the action?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, adopting these practices early on can actually set a team up for success as they grow.
Yeah.
It's about taking those, core principles, automation, collaboration, continuous improvement, and applying those to your specific needs.
Okay, so let's get practical here. Let's say you're a small startup and you're working on your first product.
Okay.
Where do you even start?
Yeah, a great starting point is to, really try to identify the pain points in your current process.
Okay.
So are you finding that manual deployments are really slowing you down? Are you struggling with inconsistent environments? Once you've really pinpointed the problem area, then you can start to explore which tool might be the right fit to address that specific problem.
So don't try to adopt every tool all at once. Okay, start with one that addresses a specific need
Yeah.
and build from there.
Yeah.
That's a relief. I was starting to feel a little overwhelmed.
It's easy to get caught up in all the excitement of, all these amazing tools, but it's really important to be strategic.
Right.
So to kind of bring this to life, let's revisit some of those real world examples and see how these principles actually play out.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Because seeing how these tools actually work is what really makes it click. Let's start with Jenkins. We talked about Netflix using it to manage thousands of deployments, but what were some of the specific challenges that they were facing before they actually adopted Jenkins?
Yeah, well, before Jenkins, their deployment process was largely manual.
Oh, wow.
So you have to imagine an entire team of engineers working around the clock, manually running tests, and then pushing code to servers.
Oh my goodness.
It was time consuming.
Yeah.
It was prone to, human error,
Right.
and it was incredibly difficult to scale.
So as Netflix grew and their code base became more and more complex,
Right.
this manual approach just wasn't sustainable.
Exactly, yeah. They desperately needed a way to automate that whole deployment pipeline, and Jenkins provided the solution.
Mm-hmm.
So by automating the build, the test, and the deployment processes, Jenkins allowed Netflix to release updates way faster and with a lot more confidence.
We also mentioned that they built their own custom Jenkins plugin,
Yes?
the Jenkins execution engine. Can you shed some light on why they actually needed that?
Yeah, so as Netflix transitioned to microservices architecture, they faced this whole new challenge, which was how to manage the dependencies between all of these different services.
Okay.
So imagine you have hundreds of these microservices, right? And each one is responsible for like a very specific function.
Right, like one for recommendations, one for search, one for streaming.
Exactly, yeah. So now imagine updating one of those microservices,
Yeah.
and you accidentally break another one that depends on it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Total chaos.
total chaos.
Yeah.
So they created the Jenkins execution engine to handle those complex dependencies. What that plugin does is it makes sure that deployments happen in the correct order,
Okay.
preventing conflicts and minimizing the risk of these cascading failures.
It's not just about using the tool off the shelf. It's
Right.
about understanding the capabilities.
Yeah.
And even extending them to fit your unique needs.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. Okay, let's shift gears over to Spotify. They use Docker to solve that infamous works on my machine problem.
Yeah.
What were some of the specific pain points that they were experiencing?
Well, Spotify was growing incredibly rapidly at the time, and they were also adopting a microservices architecture,
Mhm.
which meant that they had more developers working on more services.
Right.
And of course, more potential for things to, get out of sync.
Because each developer might have a slightly different setup on their local machine,
Exactly.
leading to code that works for one person but then breaks for another.
Exactly. And this inconsistency was causing all sorts of delays and frustration and headaches for the teams. Docker came to the rescue by providing that standardized environment.
So instead of saying, but it works on my machine, developers could package their code and all those dependencies into a Docker container, and then it run the same way anywhere.
It was a game changer, especially as they scaled their microservices architecture to thousands of independent services.
Okay, so we've got our code neatly packaged in containers, all thanks to Docker. But then how do you manage all of those containers, especially when you have thousands of them running at the same time? I mean, it sounds like you would need a conductor to keep this orchestra in sync.
You do. And that is where Kubernetes steps in. It's like the orchestrator that makes sure all those containers are deployed correctly, that they have the right resources, and they can communicate with each other.
Earlier, we mentioned Airbnb using Kubernetes to reduce their deployment times from hours to minutes. Can you elaborate on how Kubernetes actually achieved that?
Sure. Before Kubernetes, their deployment process involved a lot of manual steps and coordination between teams,
Yeah,
which left a lot of room for errors.
right.
With Kubernetes, they were able to automate all of those steps,
Okay.
and it created this much more streamlined workflow that allowed them to push updates a lot faster.
So Kubernetes essentially removed all those bottlenecks and allowed Airbnb to release new features and improvements at a much faster pace.
Much faster.
That's incredible. It's amazing how a single tool can have such a huge impact on a company's success.
Okay, we've talked about code, we've talked about containers, orchestration. What about the infrastructure that underpins all of this?
Yes, we can't forget about the infrastructure.
Of course not.
That's where Terraform comes in, right? We mentioned Uber using Terraform to manage their global infrastructure, and it's spanning, multiple cloud providers.
Right.
Can you even imagine the complexity of that?
It honestly boggles my mind just trying to keep track of all those servers, databases, and networks manually.
Nightmare, yeah.
And that's where Terraform just swoops in to save the day, right?
Okay.
So by defining their infrastructure as code, Uber can automate the provisioning and management of all of their resources.
Yeah.
And that ensures consistency and, dramatically reduces the risk of human error.
So instead of having engineers manually configure servers,
Right.
they can just write code that describes their desired infrastructure.
Exactly.
And then Terraform takes care of the rest.
Exactly. And that approach has so many benefits. It lets them track changes to their infrastructure.
Yeah.
If they need to, they can roll back to previous versions.
Oh, okay.
And it ensures that their environments are always in like a known good state.
We also talked about Slack using Terraform to manage their infrastructure on AWS.
Yeah.
What were some of the key benefits that they highlighted?
Slack really emphasized version control and rollback capabilities as being just so essential for platform reliability.
Right.
So by treating their infrastructure as code, they could keep track of every single change, collaborate really effectively, and then quickly revert to a previous state if something went wrong.
It's like a crucial safety net.
It is, especially when you're dealing with a platform that millions of people depend on every single day.
Right.
That level of control, that reliability, you just wouldn't have it without the automation, the consistency that Terraform provides.
Okay, so we've built our application, we've packaged it into containers, we've orchestrated those containers with Kubernetes, and we've automated our infrastructure with Terraform.
Right.
But how do we know if everything is actually working as it should?
Right. That's where monitoring and observability becomes so important.
Right.
And this is where Prometheus and Grafana, our dynamic duo, take center stage.
Right.
Yeah.
We talked about DigitalOcean using Prometheus to monitor their vast network of servers, but what kinds of insights were they able to gain from this data?
So Prometheus allowed them to collect and analyze metrics from, thousands of servers and services.
Wow.
And that gave them this very comprehensive view of their system's health. I mean, they could see everything from server CPU usage to network traffic to, how their applications were performing, all in real time.
So it's like having a dashboard that shows you the vital signs of your entire infrastructure.
Absolutely. And that level of visibility allowed them to identify potential issues before those issues impacted users.
Oh, wow.
For example, if they noticed a spike in CPU usage on a particular server, they could proactively go in, investigate, and fix the problem before it actually caused performance problems for their customers.
And then Grafana comes in and makes all of that data understandable, right?
Exactly. Grafana is all about visualization. So it takes the raw data that's collected by Prometheus and transforms that into beautiful and interactive dashboards.
So instead of staring at spreadsheets full of numbers, you can actually see charts and graphs and alerts that give you a much clearer picture of what's happening.
Exactly. And those visualizations can be totally customized to show you the specific metrics that are most important to you. And that allows teams to very quickly identify trends, anomalies, potential issues, and then take action.
And what about SoundCloud? How did they use this powerful duo to keep their music streaming platform in tune, so to speak?
Well, they used Prometheus and Grafana to monitor their microservices architecture. And they have hundreds of these microservices all interacting with each other.
Right.
So it was crucial that they understood how each individual service was performing. And how that was impacting the overall system.
So if a user was experiencing buffering or slow loading times, they could pinpoint which microservice was causing the bottleneck.
Exactly, and they could address it directly. That level of granularity was essential. It helped them maintain the performance and reliability of their platform.
Got it.
By tracking key metrics like, latency, error rates, request throughput, they could identify and resolve issues really quickly.
Ensuring that smooth listening experience for their users.
Exactly.
It's fascinating to see how these tools can be applied to such different situations and challenges.
Yeah.
But let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. What are some of the key takeaways from these real-world examples? What lessons can we learn from companies like, Netflix, Spotify, Airbnb? What are they doing right?
One of the most important takeaways is that DevOps is not just about the tools themselves. It's about a mindset. A mindset of automation, collaboration, and continuous improvement. The tools are very powerful enablers, but they're only effective if they're combined with the right processes and the right culture.
So it's not enough to just install Jenkins or Kubernetes and expect everything to magically work better.
Exactly.
You need to have the right people, the right processes, and the right mindset in place.
Absolutely. It's about creating this culture where teams are empowered to experiment, automate, and continuously improve.
I like that.
It's about, breaking down those silos between development and operations.
Right.
and fostering a sense of shared ownership and responsibility.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
It's not just a tech thing, it's a cultural shift.
it really is. Yeah.
And the benefits of that shift are so clear, right?
Yeah.
Faster delivery, higher quality, and ultimately happier customers.
Happier customers for sure.
Speaking of happy customers, that brings us to another key takeaway.
Okay.
The importance of focusing on the user experience.
Yes, absolutely. In each of those examples that we talked about, we saw how these companies use those tools and those principles to make things better for their users,
Right.
whether it's streaming or music playback or, making a booking online.
So it's not just about making things easier for developers or the operations teams. Yeah.
It's about using these tools to actually create a better product or a better service.
Exactly. DevOps is all about delivering value. And that value ultimately lies in the hands of the user.
Okay, so we've seen the power of these tools. We've learned some really valuable lessons from some of these industry leaders.
Yeah.
But what about practical advice? Like for those who are just starting out
Yeah.
on their DevOps journey, what steps can they take to get started?
That is a fantastic question, and it's one that we're going to dig into a lot deeper
Okay,
in the next part of our deep dive.
got it.
We're going to talk about some real actionable strategies,
Okay, love it.
tips for implementing these tools
Perfect.
and these principles effectively.
Sounds like we've got a lot more to uncover. We'll be right back after a quick break to explore the practical side of implementing DevOps. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've explored the what and the why of DevOps tools.
Right.
But now let's tackle the how. Like, how can you actually put these principles and tools into practice? It's all about taking those inspiring examples, those big companies,
Right.
and figuring out, okay, what are the actionable steps that we can take for our own team?
For our own project, yeah. Because seeing Netflix manage thousands of deployments, it's impressive.
Of course, yeah.
But it can also feel like really intimidating if
Sure.
you're just starting out.
Absolutely. And, you don't have to do everything at once.
Right.
You don't have to boil the ocean, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
The key is to start small.
Okay.
Identify one specific pain point,
Okay.
and then choose the tool that best addresses that challenge.
So instead of trying to implement like Jenkins, Docker, Kubernetes all at once,
Right.
just focus on one area where you can actually make like a tangible improvement.
Exactly. So, for example, let's say your team is struggling with, slow and error-prone manual deployments.
Okay.
Jenkins would be a great place to start. By automating those build, test, and deployment processes, you can free up your team's time and, reduce the risk of human error.
And what if you're dealing with that constant, it works on my machine problem?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's where Docker really shines, right? Docker helps you create those consistent environments.
Right.
So your code runs the same way no matter where it's deployed.
It saves a lot of time, frustration,
Oh, so much, yeah.
headaches.
And it makes it easier to collaborate
Yeah.
and share code.
So you've got your automated deployments with Jenkins. You've got those consistent environments with Docker.
Right.
What's next?
Well, as your application grows, and you start dealing with more complex deployments, that's when you might want to think about bringing Kubernetes into the picture.
Okay.
Kubernetes is, like we said, it's the orchestrator.
Right.
It helps you manage and scale those containers
Okay.
and make sure that your application stays up and running, even under, really heavy traffic.
So you've got your code flowing smoothly, your containers are humming along. But what about the infrastructure itself? That's where Terraform comes in. Right.
That is exactly where Terraform comes
Thanks
in.
and perfect.
Terraform allows you to define your infrastructure as code.
Right.
So you're automating the provisioning and management of all those servers, your databases, your networks.
Okay.
And that brings consistency. You can repeat it, you can do version control, and you bring that to your infrastructure, just like you would with your software.
So no more manually configuring servers.
Exactly.
Or worrying about inconsistencies between environments.
Right.
Everything is defined in code.
Exactly.
It makes it way easier to manage, track, and reproduce.
Right. Absolutely. And remember, you can start small with Terraform too.
Okay.
You might start by just automating the creation of a simple server or a database.
Right.
As you get more comfortable, then you can gradually expand how you're using it, to manage more of your infrastructure.
And of course, once everything is up and running,
Right.
you need to keep an eye on it all.
You do.
That's where Prometheus and Grafana come in.
That's our dynamic duo.
Right.
Prometheus, again, it's our data detective,
Okay.
constantly gathering those metrics,
Okay.
while Grafana takes that data, turns it into those beautiful, insightful dashboards.
So you can see how your application is performing at a glance,
Right.
identify any potential bottlenecks,
Exactly.
get alerted to any problems before they, become major issues.
It's like a health checkup for your system.
Yeah, I like that.
And you know what's great about Prometheus and Grafana?
What?
You can use them to monitor pretty much anything.
Okay.
Server performance, application metrics,
Yeah.
even user behavior.
So we've covered the individual tools, how they can be applied.
Right.
But DevOps, it's more than just a collection of tools, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is.
Right.
It is a philosophy.
Okay.
It's a way of working that emphasizes collaboration, automation, that continuous improvement.
Right.
It's really about breaking down those walls that exist between different teams and creating this culture where everybody has a shared responsibility.
So it's not enough to just install the tools.
No.
You need to change the way you work,
Exactly.
change the way you communicate,
Yeah.
change the way you think about building and delivering software.
It's a cultural shift, really.
And that cultural shift is really what's essential for reaping those benefits of DevOps, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about going faster, it's about quality.
Yes.
It's about reliability and ultimately customer satisfaction.
Absolutely.
You nailed it. DevOps is about delivering value to your users faster with fewer errors
Right.
and with way greater confidence.
Yeah.
That's what makes it such a powerful movement.
It is.
Well, it's been an incredible journey exploring the world of DevOps tools,
It has.
seeing how they're transforming how we build and deliver software.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure sharing these insights with you.
With everyone listening, yeah.
Hopefully it'll inspire some people to kind of embark on their own DevOps adventure.
Remember, everyone, it's a journey. Start small, experiment, learn. Never stop trying to get better.
Yeah, great advice.
And most importantly, have fun.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.